So welcome, Ana, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I'm super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is Dawn Zoldi. I am your host of Tech Industry Leadership Talks, and I am so excited today to have with us Ana Healander. She is the co-founder and the vice president of customer success at Airspace Link. And I have to tell you, I have been a super fan for a while now. So Ana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was we were talking before we got on the show. I follow you guys, you and your husband Michael, and Airspace Link on LinkedIn, and I just remember when he posted a picture of you running this like ultra marathon, 100K. You're standing there with your medal, and I was like, who is this woman? I need to speak with her about leadership because clearly not only walking the talk, running the talk. And so again, I'm just so excited to have you here. So I want to start at the beginning because I know sports has been a really big part of your life, and kind of infuses the culture that you created at Airspace Link, which is, by the way, an incredible culture. Everybody out there, if you were not aware, Airspace Link was recognized last year by Women in Drones as the industry with the Industry Diversity Award. Just the number of women you have at the top of your organization is super impressive. And but let's go back to the beginning and talk about you. I love to kind of get the origin story, right? So tell us a little bit about your background and your childhood.
Yeah, it's quite a childhood that I had. I'm super fortunate to have an amazing family. So my mom and dad moved here from Brazil as teenagers, and
Wow.
my dad had been working for Ford in Brazil, and they had asked for some help because industry was booming in the late 60s. And so him and my mom took a chance and moved to Detroit. Had never seen snow, had never experienced a
Oh
winter
my
in their life,
gosh.
did not speak English, but they came here hoping for the American dream. And so I grew up in a very religious home. I went to a private school, but where Brazilian culture was still very heavily dominant inside our house. So my parents worked really, really hard, and I was always exposed, like I was telling you earlier before we were talking, to the arts, for which we can delve into a little bit of that later. But the Brazilian culture was still always pretty heavily present in our home. So
Well, I want to dive into that a little bit. And by the way, Anna, there are people out there watching us right now. We know this, we can see them. If you are out there, just remember this is live. So please jump in the chat, ask your questions, give Anna your positive encouragement. We love all of those things. So that's really, amazing, for a couple like your parents. First of all, right, from Brazil, moving to Michigan, never having seen snow. And that's where you were born, right? That you were born in Michigan?
yes, I was born here.
Okay. So you picked this theme for today's episode of lifelong learning and servant leadership. And I'm curious why you picked that particular theme, just kind of given your upbringing and your background.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's part of my background where I grew up trying to think of something bigger than yourself, right? Thinking of others, having empathy, being kind. That was just a huge part of my childhood. I had amazing teachers at the school that I went to who that was, do unto others, that kind of thing. So I think that's always been at the back of my mind as far as jobs go. And that's why I'm in customer success, right? I'm so passionate about helping our customers, and I've done that for the last 25 years. And basically every industry that I've been a part of, I've kind of been, even if I didn't start there, they kind of veer me to that position because I think that's just kind of who I am. I'm always trying to learn and help. And so I think that's part of being a servant is you don't necessarily think of yourself, but the broader team to be successful. So.
You mentioned that golden rule, do unto others, and the rest of that, of course, for those that don't know, is as you would have them do unto you.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because when I was joining the Air Force, they asked me two philosophies in my interview, two philosophies that I live by, and that was one of them. And the other was carpe diem, which is seize the
Yes.
day.
Absolutely.
And leave as little as you may to tomorrow is the rest of that saying. But so cool. And I imagine this idea of servant leadership and the idea of working with others started very early as well, through your sports. But before we talk about that, I would love to just share a picture of you with your dad,
Yes,
growing
please.
up. It's so adorable. You have some pictures here, like already, like probably barely able to walk there in that one with a baseball bat in your hand.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about sports and how like that became such a huge part of your life.
Yeah, I think that's also a family thing. Brazil, believe it or not, big soccer, football. And so when I was going to school, I think people probably saw just a talent, if not a talent, a passion for moving and playing sports and team. And so it was a prerequisite in our home that if you got all A's and B's, you were allowed to do other things outside of education, because education was always pretty heavily dominant in our house. And so I excelled in academics, and that way I was able to play all the sports that I wanted. And I played softball, which you can see there in the picture. And then basketball became just a huge family affair. My brother played, had scholarship offers. I played, and I could just say that taught me so many things, just life lessons that I think are prevalent even today, like strategy, teamwork, practicing, discipline, punctuality, showing up on time, thinking of others. And so winning and losing, all those things kind of, even as a sport, has kind of taken me to where I am today. So it's been a huge part of my life, still is. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the word discipline. I think that's so true, to be part of a team. And like you said, to show up on time, to just those basic things that you learn through teamwork. And we have a really cool picture of you playing youth basketball as well. I'd love to kind of pop that one up, because it was your dad, really, I think, that you had mentioned that introduced you to a lot of these sports. So we saw softball, we see basketball here. What else were you involved in?
Wow, I was involved in choir, and a little bit of track. Our school was kind of small, so we didn't have a lot of students that could participate in all different kinds of sports for most of my childhood. And like I said, softball, swimming. I mean, you name it, we were doing it. As a girl, I was begging my brother to let me play hockey with his buddies, and few broken fingers, all that. But what it just exposed us, and it was just the four of us, right? When we moved here, we didn't have extended family, and so we were always very closely knit. And sports became something that kind of connected us all together when we weren't working and weren't at school. My dad would take us to basketball games and football games, and tradition of him and my brother seeing the Thanksgiving football game every year at the Detroit Lions. And so sports has always been integrated into our family somehow.
That is so cool. I have to admit, I did get a little bit involved in sports when I was younger. It was mostly my brother, I think. I played a little bit of soccer. I was never really a great athlete, to be honest with you. So I kind of went the direction of dance. And, it's just kind of different, but I loved it. And I did it all, like, from the time I was really little all the way through high school.
But I still consider that a sport, right? That's still a sport. You're still moving and doing things. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, when I progressed in ballet to toe shoes, that's like a modern torture device. I mean, the blisters I would get, it was, I didn't last too long at that point. I was like, all right, I'm not going to do this, professionally, it's not really fun anymore. It's so painful. But it was really cool all along the way. And I still, to this, just get me to a party and get some music on, and I'll be the one out there dancing for sure. So, but it was really the Air Force that made me kind of have to kind of tap into that inner athlete that I really hadn't tapped into. And I know we're going to talk about CrossFit later, but I got big into CrossFit when I was in the Air Force, as well. So tell me a little bit about like growing up. I talked about these two sayings that resonated with me that stuck, when I got interviewed. What is one saying that you can kind of look back, maybe from your parents or from your upbringing, that kind of stuck with you over time and still remains today in your mind?
Yeah, so my parents were extremely hardworking people, and my dad used to always say to us, like, there's no free lunch, right? You have to do the work, you have to invest the time. And so that's always stuck with me. I think as we get older, we sometimes look back at our parents and we're like, wow, they were saying some super wise, insightful things, but as a teenager, that might not resonate, or you might not connect as well because you're rebelling and you're trying to figure things out on your own. But as I've gotten older, and now that we are, have this company, Airspace Link, that has turned into something so amazing, I realize that we have to do the work, right? We're solving
Yeah.
really difficult problems in the tech space, and there is no free lunch. It's hard, but
Yeah.
it's so fun. And, Airspace Link has tried, like you said, to make a culture of fun while still solving these super difficult problems and being the leader in the industry in this mobility space. So.
Yeah, I agree. There is no free lunch, and clearly, being on sports teams or whatever you're doing, you're putting in the work. What is it? Isn't it like that 10,000 hour rule? To really perfect something, it takes like on
Yes.
average 10,000 hours of repetitions, and that's almost like in anything in life, I'd say. And that includes education, right? Because I love that you picked as part of your theme lifelong learning, because all the folks I've interviewed and throughout my own career, I've noticed that the really excellent leaders are those that continuously learn throughout their life and never stop learning from everybody, and including from books. One person that comes to mind is General, well, at the time was General Mattis. I worked for him at U.S. Central Command, and that guy, I mean, just mind blowing how educated he was. So let's talk a little bit about your education. So you started out a small private school. It
Mhm.
sounds like you excelled because you were clearly playing sports, which meant you did get those A's and B's.
Yes. Yes, I did.
And and then you progressed. You went on to college after that.
Yep, I started at Eastern Michigan University and studied business. But yeah, I always, like I said earlier too, I still think that you continue with your passion, even though you can have your degree in business or whatever. I feel like as I've gotten older, I've not transitioned from business, but my education also was running a family business with my dad. That to me was a degree in college that I could have never paid for on a piece of paper, because when you're in it and you're doing it every day for 10 years, that also was just a huge learning point for me, was helping my dad run our family business on top of, school and sports and everything else that I was doing.
So what was the family business?
Yeah, so while my dad was still at Ford, he started a very small steel company, and he saw that there was something missing in the market because he was a tool and die maker by trade. And normally when people wanted to buy steel, let's say just to fix a small part in a factory or to do product development, they didn't need massive amounts, but most steel mills would make you by minimums. Anyways, so we opened up a store that you didn't have a minimum. You could just walk in as a hobbyist, or you could walk in as one of the big three and just order the small part of steel. But what it was based on, of course, is what I'm doing now, is customer success. And and my dad, we'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning if the line went down somewhere, and we would drop off a piece of steel. And we
Wow.
would stay open on Saturdays, and we would be a walk-in. And it was just, I did every single part of the business because it was just three of us at the time. And so you had to learn to do it all. So that to me was just a huge learning point and a turning point in my career, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a little bit like me. I mean, you can learn things from books, but it's really practicing. It's really getting out there and seeing things. You can read a business book, which is great, but seeing it and seeing your dad and his example, and being an entrepreneur like that on top of his day job, holy shnikes, I can understand why you're working Saturdays and getting up at 3, right? Because being an entrepreneur, that's what that is all about. So wow, that's really impressive. I remember when I was in law school, you know, they give us these books, here, read these cases about evidence. And I'm like, I didn't understand. And all the books, they always talk about the weird cases. They're not even the rules, they're all the weird exceptions, right? So everything's backwards. But it wasn't until I actually was working for the city of Philadelphia, sitting in a courtroom, representing two police officers that had been charged with like a civil rights violations. And that week in federal court, I learned evidence. Like that was it. That's all it took, was for me to see it in action. And so that's so cool that as you were learning business, you already had been exposed to it and were still doing that business with your dad. And I can
Absolutely.
appreciate, yeah, that's super. That's amazing. But speaking of books, like, was there a book when you were in college or kind of along the way that really kind of left a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, it's so funny bringing that up because as we get older, I'm actually thinking about going back to school and actually pursuing that degree of literature because I've started to enjoy reading so much, and it was always a passion of mine. But when I took lit in college, I remember reading Toni Morrison, and which was amazing. And then part of the group had to read The Confederacy of Dunces, and I just remember seeing the book, you know, as a 19 or 20-year-old, and it was just massive. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to read this book? But
Yeah.
it was so funny. And it was so detailed, and I just thought the person that wrote this just has to have the most brilliant mind, and so this became this like lifelong love of reading for me. I've read all different kinds of books, all different genres. I love history, I love fiction, and like Colleen Hoover right now is like my new girl crush of authors. So I would tell anyone out there who really wants to read an amazing author right now is Colleen Hoover, and I'm on like her fourth book right now, which is amazing.
Well, I'm gonna have to check that out for sure.
You will
You know,
love
I
it.
guess my Confederacy of Dunces, if you will, was The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I had to read it for a class, and like you, it was like a 900 plus pager, and I was like, holy shnikes, right? I literally created a plan. Like, if I read X number of pages a day, I'm gonna get through this thing. And then we had this oral exam, and no kidding, the professor asked me what on what page did they mention the name of the town where the entire book took place. And by the way, it was one page out of I was like, who would, seriously, you're testing me on this. But it was a phenomenal book, and just kind of life changing if you never read it. It's like the three aspects of, there's three brothers and they each represent an aspect of man. You know, the spiritual, the physical, and the intellectual. And these brothers and their conversations are crazy. But really, like you, it sparked this, I got to keep reading, you know, for me. And that's like all I've done my whole career. I'm still doing it. So going back to your career early on, so right out of college, then did you kind of continue working for your family business, or did you
Yes.
go a different direction?
No, we ended up having the family business for about 10 years. And then my dad, you know, was at that point where he had left Ford and was looking to retire. So him and my mom decided to sell it, and I was part of that acquisition. So the corporate, because it was a franchise, the corporate store bought us out, and I stayed and managed a couple locations within Michigan for about 3 more years. And then my career kind of just went all over the place, but wherever it went, I was in customer success or account management of some kind. And it took me down some crazy paths. I was the customer success manager at Advanced Disposal, which at the time was the world's largest privately held trash hauling company. So I'm like, how can someone as girly as me be in metal and steel and garbage? But I will tell you that those two jobs made me who I am today, and I learned so many things that you would never have thought that would take me to where I am today. And those qualities have kind of moved me to Airspace Link. So
Well, we're gonna talk about Airspace Link in 1 second, but you just said something I want to pick up on.
okay.
So give me maybe like three of the things you learned from working in steel and like with the garbage disposal company and all the things you did. Like, what are kind of the three big takeaways that you've now brought forward into Airspace Link and what you're doing now?
That's a great question. Well, first, I learned work ethic from my dad. I mean, he worked two full-time jobs for over 5 years to make sure that, you know, Metal Supermarkets, which was the name of our store, was successful, but that he was still working at Ford, which he loved. I mean, that was what brought us here to the States, right? So I of course have a love for Ford Motor, but I learned the work ethic from him. And then at Advanced Disposal, I learned a lot about work-life balance from my mentor, John Tidonio, who is an amazing human being. Learned so much from him. And then I also learned that sometimes you have to navigate a difficult customer. Not all customers are going to love what you're doing, and you have to learn to be professional. Sometimes it's hard, right? You want to be like, hey, but it's not that. It's let me take it in, let me take this information, let me process it, and then we'll come up with a resolution. So it was how to balance not just happy accounts and happy customers, but customers who might be not happy or not willing to stay with you, and how we kind of learn to navigate those different relationships with customers.
Yeah, I think it's almost a truth that the feedback you get from people when you work with them, it's one extreme or the other. Like the people that actually give feedback in any way are either super happy, right? They're the ones that love you, or they're the opposite, right? They're like they're like you said, they're not going to work with you again. Something happened, they're disappointed in some way. It's that giant that giant crowd in the middle that's probably more on the happy side that don't bother to tell you, so you're going through life like on this roller coaster of getting really positive feedback sometimes and then dealing with that really negative customer. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, Anna, that like you have to interface with people. What advice would you give to somebody that has to deal with a customer that maybe isn't the most satisfied for whatever reason, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise? It's how they feel. You can't argue with that. What do you have any like tips that you would want to pass along to someone like that has to deal with that?
Yeah, I've dealt with that for a long time, and I would say that comes back to the servant leadership, right? That
Yeah.
you have to earn the trust of your customer, that you have to listen, you have to learn from them. And I actually am so blessed that a lot of our customers at Airspace Link aren't even our customers anymore, they're our friends. We've built relationships with these people. And so while you can't do that with every account, I'm sure if you have, many, many, many accounts that you're working with, I would say feeling that way, like you're trying to help them. You're not trying to sell anybody anything. You're just trying to solve a problem, fix an issue, and then build a relationship while earning their trust. So they can feel that. Customers or your clients or your friends, they can sense whether you're genuine or not. And so we try to work at Airspace Link and everywhere I've worked with a big source of empathy and trying to help. And so that's kind of how I've always worked in my career.
Yeah, I'm giving you the heart symbol here because something I actually tell my own kids, which is, life is about relationships. And when I say life, business is a subcategory of life. Sometimes we get that backwards, at least I do. We'll talk about balance here in a minute. But I totally agree. It's all about relationships. And so were you ever able to turn one around, like an example where maybe a business relationship or somebody had complained or was not happy, you were able to kind of engage with them in this kind of servant leadership way that kind of turned that whole relationship around in a positive direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just bring up an example of a customer who wasn't even a very large customer, but we had just acquired another company. And so there was some mix up, there's just always transitionary periods when you acquire a different company. And so this customer didn't feel like they were getting the level of service. So I got in my car in a dress because I was at the office that day, and I literally picked up his garbage out of his driveway and I drove it back to our office because I'm like, this guy did not have his pickup on time, whatever the situation was. And I just remember him sending my boss an email, John, at the time, and was saying, I do not like your company right now. And I can't even believe that you have someone that great working for you. She's amazing. She went above and beyond. And I just think that is it was just a small thing I did, but it had a profound impact on the customer because they were like, this person's willing to come out. Who knows what the weather was like in Michigan that day, in a dress, pick up my garbage, put it in the back of her truck, and take it away from my house. And so that was just an example of something that we were able to then retain that customer.
Yeah, my guess it was a Ford F-150. But
I don't know, I've got lots of Fords.
I just imagine you, Anna, like the younger version of you, like going out there and like in your dress, like leaving the office and picking up this guy's trash. But you're right. Little things matter. And I know that's something that you firmly believe and you've infused in your company. You talked about having fun. So let's talk a little bit about Airspace Link and the culture you created there. Again, super cool that you've been able to bring in a very diverse group of folks into the organization. So let's talk about that first. Like, well, let's back up. At some point along the way, you met Michael and got married.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about that, and then like this, how Airspace Link was even born, because you had this background in steel and garbage disposal, and now you're doing like airspace, right? Issues. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so of course we met at a gym. I mean, typical,
Ah,
'cause that's where I lived, right?
yeah.
Most of my time. And he walked in and, all that sparks flew and all that stuff. And then we met at CrossFit. He's a huge athlete. He was an athlete in his own right in college. And now even still, he does amazing things at CrossFit. Did part of the ultra with me as the pacer, so I wouldn't have to run in the middle of the night by myself. And so I'm super grateful for the support, because it's very hard to train for these like crazy distance races if you don't have support at home and family to kind of let you run those 3-4 hour weekend, 5 hour weekends when you're out and about doing those sorts of things. So he was working somewhere else and came home and said, "Hey, I've had this idea for few years, but I think this is the right time." And I said, "Okay, well, what's the idea?" So he told it to me, and I just remember like being, "Oh my gosh, we have to do this. Like, what's it going to take?" And we sacrificed so much to start Airspace Link, but it was the best sacrifice I think that he and I have ever made. We have an amazing team, and we can talk about that,
Yeah.
of diverse people and diverse backgrounds. And that has what I think is what's made us be such a great company, because if it was all the same type of people, I mean, how fun would that be? And
Yeah.
we have such intelligent, smart, funny, outgoing folks that work at Airspace Link, and I think that's what's kind of added to the culture.
Now, somewhere along the way, this is a picture,
Oh
Anna,
yeah.
you had shared with us, and now we're sharing with everybody. You'd mentioned CrossFit. This is, I know the Murph because, like I said,
Yes.
I used to be a CrossFitter. I frankly never looked like that, like any of you. So this is you, Michael, and your son,
My stepson Blake. Yeah.
your stepson, Blake. Okay. And
Yes.
how old is Blake in this picture?
Blake's probably 15 in this picture. He's 16 now, so he's grown, even, if you can imagine, even taller
Oh my
than,
gosh.
yeah. He's also a CrossFitter. He's also a part of Civil Air Patrol. So
Oh,
he's also,
cool.
yeah, he's doing lots of military stuff, flying planes, and he's just a really great, great kid. But yeah, we honor our veterans every year by doing the Murph. As a matter of fact, we just named our puppy Murph, because that's how much
Oh.
we love this workout. And so yeah, we do this every year.
And for those that don't know, the Murph is named after a Navy SEAL. I believe he was killed in Afghanistan,
Yep.
if I recall
Yes.
correctly. It's a pretty intense workout that every year on the anniversary of his death, CrossFitters across the world will do this to commemorate. They do it other times as well, but let me see if I can remember, Anna. I know there's a run involved, several
Hmm.
miles. Uh, Most people wear a weighted vest, don't have to. I know there's pull-ups,
100 pull-ups.
burpees.
No, 100. You start off with a mile run with a
Okay.
weighted vest, and then you come in and you do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and then you finish again with a mile run with
Yeah,
your
no
vest
biggie.
on.
Yeah. So
It takes a lot of
yeah.
training.
Yeah, so it's pretty intense, and it's almost like the Brothers Karamazov. I remember one day I walked into CrossFit, and like every day it's a different WOD or workout of the day,
Hmm.
and it was like 150 burpees. That's all that was on the board, and everybody just, you could just see like, and I just remember, all right, I'm gonna do like 10, like 15 sets of 10. Like once I broke it down, and what the crazy, and maybe you agree with this, Anna. What I found about CrossFit was, and I think this is why Navy SEALs actually use it to train, there's like a huge mental component to it, where you can walk out of there and be like, I just did 150 burpees, like bring it on. Like I don't care what you throw at me today, like I did that. And I just remember, like, even in the military, we have to do this. You're going to laugh. Just, like a little 2 mile run. For me, that was a big deal because I'm not a runner, right? But like you do like a workout like the Murph, and you're like, okay, so we're talking 7 times around this track. Not a problem.
Right.
So bring, those workouts and doing it with your beautiful family.
Mhm.
And, I could see where that would be kind of, and you know what? Your theme is servant leadership and lifelong learning. Fitness is also kind of a learning process, I would say. And you're clearly very deeply involved in that. So tell us then. So you meet Michael in the gym. I love that story. You're both fitness buffs. He comes home one day and says, "Let's do this thing," and you create Airspace Link.
Mhm.
So tell us then about kind of the beginning. You mentioned building this diverse team and why it was so important to have different perspectives at the table, and kind of what you do uh, from a culture standpoint to infuse those things that you feel are so important, like lifelong learning, like servant leadership into the organization.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I feel like we're always a work in progress, but that's part of the servant leadership is we take what our employees say and our team members say, and we try to improve. And whether it be ring rows in the office. If anybody wants to do some pull-ups before lunch, they can do that. Or we try to do work-life balance where if someone's not feeling good, like, hey, just you take care of you and your family. Family first, I feel like is super important in the culture that we've built at Airspace Link. And then as far as like the servant leadership is, we want everyone's input. And as a team, I think that's where the trust is built, is if our team members know that we're taking what they're saying and we're actually trying to do something with that information, because these people are industry experts. I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily an industry expert in the drone space. So I trust my team and they trust me to take that information and try to solve these, like I said, super complex problems that are in the industry right now, but we're doing it. And I feel like that's why we've become industry leaders, is because we've got the right team of super smart people from all different backgrounds, but they're all, bringing a lot of their industry expertise from other, facets of life too. And it's just brought us into this like extremely cool company that I'm so proud of. I mean, I look at every single employee and I'm like, I just can't believe we've amassed a team this great so quickly. And I know that, not to give a shout out to Michael, but it's because of his passion and his, I think, futuristic, like he's visionary. He's a visionary. He sees into the future where I'm not necessarily like that with, and he sees so deep in that he's been able to bring this like extraordinarily awesome team together to work on these complex problems.
Well, like I said, I've been watching from the
Yeah.
sidelines, really wanting to work with you guys for a while. I'm so glad we're finally getting to do that and to have these conversations because just from kind of an outsider that looks at the industry, I knew early on that you guys were going to succeed. I could see it happening, and you know, I'm not saying for me, the Women in Drones Award was kind of a pivotal point. I think it was for you guys, a recognition of what you had already achieved, but you've done some like spectacular things this year. So can you give me some examples? Like you mentioned, kind of like the pull-up bar. Like you guys have a pull-up bar in the office?
We have ring rows in the office.
Okay, that's
We
so
have the
cool.
bike rack, so a lot of our employees like to bike or rollerblade in the summer. Obviously, the winter is coming, and so that makes it a little more difficult. We
Yeah.
provide lunches for everyone every time they're in the office. I mean, we just try to keep it light, right? And we're helping communities, like I said, by giving back. We do.
Yep.
We worked at Forgotten Harvest one day as a whole team. We just said, hey, let's take the day off. We're going to go work at the farm. We picked vegetables all day for the local food bank. Michael and I just did the Detroit Dog Rescue walk where we try to raise money for their new shelter. So it's like we're that type of company where while we're so blessed and we're doing so great, we also want to push that back out to the community. And that's just a small part of what we're doing at Airspace Link.
Well, and that's really, I mean, the dog shelter thing, that's so cool because people will see you. Let's just hypothetically say you're wearing your t-shirt that says Airspace Link. this isn't like a typical public engagement for a company like that, right? But I guarantee people are coming up to you and say, tell us about, oh, what is Airspace Link? What do
Yeah.
you guys do? And probably person by person, you're making that difference out in your community, not just by giving back, but just by being there,
Right.
and kind of being also a voice for the industry at the same time. So that's really, really cool. I love that you took the office out to a farm to
Hmm.
do things together outside. I think that's awesome. That was like one of the, it's so hard, I think, when you're, like you said, Anna, you're working hard, right? You're for the to carve time out for fun with your team in a meaningful way that's not like, mandatory fun.
Hmm.
So doing something like that outdoors, that is so cool. It was just Halloween, and one of my fondest memories, honestly, every year when I was the boss, we would do what we call reverse trick or treating, where we would all get dressed up. Several years we kind of picked a group costume. I don't know why they were always like, okay, you be Gru, we're all the minions. I'm like, why are
Oh,
you always
that's
picking,
funny.
So we did things like that, and the reverse trick or treating was we'd bring the candy and give it out to people.
That's amazing.
But we were in costume, and people would, like, on a military base, people like, what do you, I walked around the Pentagon, I remember one time, I had an Oscar the Grouch costume, I had a giant trash can, and like I had filled it with candy, and I'm walking around the Pentagon handing people candy dressed as Oscar the Grouch. People were like, who are you? And what are you doing? I'm like, hey, happy Halloween. Just really fun to do stuff like that. Um, let's talk about balance though in the midst of all this, all right? So you've got this incredible stepson, husband, you're out there training. By the way, we've got some really cool pictures of you in marathons with Michael, so I'd like to show those now. Here we
Yeah.
go. So there you are, chugging away. It looks like that one was really cold because you're both wearing gloves and hats.
Yeah, that was a
Uh,
cold one.
yeah, yeah. And so how do you, this takes significant training. This takes, like, training takes time. You like
Hmm.
the business you're running and being, the vice president of customer success takes time. How how do you feel like you have balance? Because when I ask people this, the answers are usually interesting. So do you feel like you have balance in your life? If so, how do you do it? Because we all want to know. And if not, like, what might you tweak to maybe get a little more balance?
Yeah, that's great. I think there's always that struggle, right, between work and life balance, because you
Yeah.
obviously need to work with, yet you want to do things that make your job better, that you're a better person when you come into work. So
Yes.
I'm always, because that's just who I am. I'm always struggling internally with that work-life balance. But I think what makes me, I guess, successful at it is that you have a good support system that allows you to do those things. And I
Yeah.
think Michael knows how passionate I am about fitness and running. And I think he's like, hey, she's going to go do her run at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. It doesn't matter. If she doesn't get that run in, she's not going to be at the office, ready to go. And that to me is just what gets me started every day, is doing
Yeah.
something. Even if, like you said, if it's a CrossFit workout with my personal trainer that I've had for 7 years, she's amazing. Or if it's going for a run with my dog by myself, it's just a way that grounds me and gets me set up to take on whatever challenges I have for the rest of the day, because I've already taken care of me
Yep.
early, and now I can take care of everyone else and do all the things that I need to get done the rest of the day.
That's really cool. So you're a morning workout person.
Very early,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I was in the military. Now that I'm have my own business, I'm getting back to it, Anna.
Okay.
COVID. I don't. Everybody blames COVID for everything, but when they kind of shut the gym down, that was a really great excuse to be like, well, I'll just walk my dog today, and that was like
Right.
2 years. But getting back to it,
Mhm.
it's a process. Like you said, it's all a process.
Yes.
Yeah, but so that's really cool. So what would you say then, kind of from that balance perspective, would be like a recipe for success that other people could learn from?
That's a great question. I think, when you brought up COVID, you had a choice, right? You
Yeah.
could stay inside, or you could navigate a different world. And that's what kind of I decided at that moment. I'm like, I cannot sit in here every
Yep.
day and not be outside. So that's actually when my training took a different course, and I started doing really long runs when my gym was closed. I'd always done half marathons and a marathon, but I had never gone ultra
Yeah.
until COVID hit, and I had the opportunity to be outside even longer.
Yeah.
So I'd say the recipe for success is finding what you love
Yep.
and then work on that, because you're always going to be learning new techniques and new races or new goals that you could be hitting. But I feel like if you find what you love to do, then you'll keep doing it and you'll stay well. And that is why we're so passionate about wellness at Airspace Link too, because I feel like if you can find a passion, it could be anything. It could be golf, tennis. We just took pickleball lessons this weekend for the first time. We
Oh,
had a
fun.
blast.
Yeah.
So fun. And that's a new thing that we're probably going to add to make our winter a little more exciting, is we'll go play some pickleball with some folks. And so I'm feeling like if you're just always in that process of learning and finding your true passion, then I feel like that is a great recipe for success.
Yeah, I love how you've incorporated this lifelong learning, servant leadership into the culture of your organization. I love how you've infused fitness as part of that culture, because I agree with you. Like, even if it's just getting out of your chair, doing laps around the office or whatever it is, like getting up and out is key, I think, to not only physical but mental wellness, and just making the workplace a better place. That's so cool that you're doing that. Oh my gosh, I told you before we started, Anna, that our time would fly, and it
That's
has.
okay.
We have like 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So I want to kind of do this lightning round, and I know we have a
Okay.
picture to pop up like for my
Okay.
second question here, but so I know we talked about your book, and you said Confederacy of Dunces was one in
Yes.
college that was like really kind of life changing for you, from a lifelong learning, sparking that passion to read. Is there another book like that's one of your favorites? I know you talked about Colleen Hoover
Yeah.
lately has been your girl crush for
Yes.
authors. Um, any other books that like maybe you would commend to people out there to read that have helped you along the
Yeah.
way?
Yeah, it's not a very big book, but I think it's super beneficial for everyone to read. I try to read it a couple times a year, and it's just called The Four Agreements. Of course, you're going to ask me what they all are, but it's, be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Always do your best. And then I always forget the fourth one, but it's one of those books that centers me, because I think when people talk, especially in today's day, like we tend to take things so personal, and it's not anything about us. It's the reflection of the other person and what they're going through. And so we need
Yeah.
to be more, have some more empathy, because who knows what everyone's going through something, right? So we need to be extra kind. So I feel like The Four Agreements has kind of centered me, and I try to read it once or twice a year. And that's just a great book. And all his books also, again, are kind of like self-love and motivating and better to improve yourself as a human. And so that's probably a book I would recommend to
The
people.
Four Agreements. I'm putting that one on the list
You
because
would
that
love,
sounds.
it's a very quick read, but it's a great book.
Okay, awesome. Good, good, good. All right. The other question we ask everybody is, who is your hero?
Hmm. So when you asked me that earlier, I was like, well, that's a no-brainer for me. It's a super easy question. I would have to say that my dad, for a million different reasons, and we don't have enough time on this episode to talk about him, and my mom too. She's amazing. But my dad, I always tell people, every really truly important thing that I needed to learn as an adult, I learned from him. Whether it be work ethic, even though my mom was she worked super hard too for our family, but just watching him take chances, start his own business when had a safe, cushy job at Ford,
Right.
and how to save money and how to buy a beautiful home for your family. And he provided us with, private school, and he even got me a tutor so that I would not forget my Portuguese. So I'm still very fluent, and that way I can travel all around the world and I can speak Portuguese, and it allows me to understand other languages as well. And then he exposed me to the arts, music. I was going to concerts with him from the time I was a little girl. So now I have this love of music and Broadway shows and plays and sporting events. He took us, and he also allowed me to travel internationally as a child. And I just didn't grow up in an area where a lot of kids were able to do the things that he allowed me to do. And he's just a very good human being. So I would have to say that he will always be my hero. So.
Oh, I love that. And I hope someday I get to meet him. But last but not least,
Sure.
what is one leadership tip that you learned along the way that you would love to pass along to others?
That's a really great question. And I would just say, have an open ear. Listen to what people are actually saying. I think there's so much being said that it's hard to really listen and filter that out and take that information. So I think at Airspace Link, again, what we try to do as a team, especially on the leadership team and beyond, because we have 50 employees now and we're continuing to grow and doing amazing things in the space that you'll see, is just to always be listening to what your teammates say and what the industry is saying, and then take that information and try to do good with it. So just say, keep an open mind and an open ear.
Well, that's a great note to end on. You know, we talked at length today about this theme of lifelong learning and servant leadership, and I think that puts a nice bow on it as we close out this episode. So Ana, thank you so much for taking this time with us today. It's been so great to get to know you a little bit better and to understand basically how you've created this incredible company just from the way you were raised and all the things that you hold dear. So thank you so much for sharing. We're out here.